we didn't really have a good space to stop, but you probably saw our old Burying Point Cemetery. And what you can see as you're walking by is that on the other side of that cemetery is an enormous seawall that goes down to New Derby Street, because in our day, again, this was the Burying Point Cemetery. It was a point of land that the South River kind of curved around before it went down further into town. So this was actually a pretty lonely spot in our day, this Burying Point Cemetery. And a couple of folks have asked about the witch trials, and yes, in fact, we did have witchcraft tourism in our day as well. We would, if we had visitors coming, even Mr. John Adams, when somebody told me that when Mr. John Adams came here to visit in, I believe it was 1768 or 69, he was staying with some relatives, and they took him over to where they believed the witches had been hanged. So he went over to Gallows Hill. And then people would come and we would take them to the Burying Point Cemetery to show them the grave of John Hawthorne. Of course, tell the story of what had happened with Giles Corey being pressed to death over where the Howard Street Cemetery is now. So yes, we very much enjoyed a spooky tale on an October evening here in Salem. It was not nearly as overwhelming, I would say, as it is today. Mainly a few stories and a couple of locations that we would bring people to, but nothing really more than that. And of course, Mrs. Kerwin had the old Kerwin house completely renovated, so it looked nothing like what it does today with its pointed gable roofs and rather dark exterior. It was actually a rather nice Georgian home when we lived here, when we used to go to visit her. So we're going to walk back up to Essex Street now, and we're going to go take a look at the Gardner Pingree House, which, when it was built, had the second highest tax rate in Salem after the Darby Mansion. So when you take a look at it, you can at least get a little bit of a glint of what the Darby Mansion would have looked like. Of course, being timber rather than brick, the Darby Mansion was much larger, and if you could just imagine anything that could be carved on it being carved or having an urn placed on it, you'll get the idea of what the Darby Mansion looked like. Mrs. Darby loved a good urn, I do have to say.